Okay, we're going to pick back up. Can the folks in the back hear me? All right, good deal. I was getting some feedback saying that you may not, so I want to make sure everyone can hear. So another special part of our memorial service today is the pre-launch briefing. Our CEO, Charlie Chafer, has been doing the pre-launch briefing since our very first Founders Flight in 1997. This will be his 19th pre-launch briefing. So without any further ado, our CEO, Charlie Chafer, for the pre-flight briefing.
The very first one I did was in the Canary Islands, and we had 4 people with us. So we've matured a little bit over 19 missions. I wanted to start out by saying, wow. Everybody else talked about the stories and the families and who's on board. And, you know, having done 19 of these, it's always the same, and yet everybody's life is individual. Everyone is special. And it's just amazing to hear the outpouring of accomplishment, of love, of perseverance that is the hallmark of the lives of the folks that are flying with us. And I also got to say the company that's doing it. You all remember we should be in Florida today. And part of the reason that we're not, the main reason that we're not, is that what makes this service affordable and possible, you know, those rockets that fly typically go for $100 million, $60 to $100 million. So when we first put the business plan of this together, we thought, well, we can't afford that. You know, we're not going to be able to do that and be able to bring the value of the flight. So the whole world of what's called secondary payloads grew up as we grew up. In fact, I think we had some of the very first secondary payloads. And what it means is great. It means you can go to space, you can go affordably. It just means you have absolutely no say whatsoever in where it flies from, when it flies, how it's going to get there. It's just we're all along for the ride. But I know from talking to you all that we're all grateful that we're even able to do this. You know, it's not easy, but it is so worthwhile, so extremely worthwhile to look out here and know that you all are going to have an amazing moment. Hopefully right at T0 11:44 tonight. But there is a launch window, and you know, we may be enjoying ourselves post midnight, waiting for the launch. But trust me, it'll be worth your while. So what I want to do first in the pre-launch briefing is supply what I believe is fantastic news. We heard yesterday, and we confirmed today, that the first stage of Falcon is coming right back to the landing zone here. So you will see it. If it were flying out and landing on the barge, you would not see it. But it's about 8 minutes from launch. You'll be kind of looking around, and you'll hear boom, boom. And believe me, it will be a big boom. And that will be the announcement that the first stage is on its way back here to land in front of your very eyes. So we had nothing to do with it. We lucked out. We're happy that we're able to tell you that we not only see it go up, but we see first stage come back. So I'm pleased and happy about that for all of you all. The second thing I need to do is the speech I've given 19 times so far, and it has to do with tonight. One of 3 things will happen. And the thing we believe will happen and have a high confidence, increasingly high confidence because of the professionalism of the launch team and the crew at Vandenberg is that we'll have a successful launch. We'll see it, it goes up, and we achieve orbit, and we've fulfilled our obligation to you, but more importantly, you've fulfilled your obligation to your loved one. You have put them in orbit. And again, that's not easy to do. So you all should feel, and I know you will, a sense of accomplishment, because space is still, it's still rocket science. And as I say, since I started in the business in the early 80s, we've gotten much, much more regular, precise, and capable in our launches. So that's option number one. But we all have to be prepared for options 2 and 3. Option 2 is delay. And as you saw if you followed these launches, the one just before us, same launch pad, same rocket, got to T0 and aborted. Didn't fly. They had to recycle. 2 days later, they flew it. That happens because I had the unbelievable privilege as a 27-year-old kid out of Georgetown of going to work for America's hero, Mercury astronaut Deke Slayton. Deke not only was part of the right stuff, he picked the first man on the moon. And Deke everything he said was pithy and straight out of the right stuff. He was a genuine article. But Deke would always say, you know, NASA doesn't give out any awards for an on-time failure. Just true. So the way I analogize it is a really good golf swing is a lot like a rocket launch, which is a whole lot of things got to happen at precisely the right time for you to get that ball to go where you want it to go. Same is true in rocketry, which is they're not going to fly if they get any indications. And much of the final part of the count is automatic, so they don't even have anything to do with it. If a sensor picks up a pressure difference, that's all it was a pressure difference, off nominal, as they say, they're not going to fly. And we can all understand that. There's a lot of really expensive and valuable stuff sitting on top of that rocket, including our precious payload. So everyone wants to be absolutely certain of a high degree, almost a certainty of success before that button is theoretically pushed. And that causes sometimes aborts, it causes delays. In our case, we have I believe it's a 4-hour launch window. What does that mean? It means we could be there till 4 a.m. waiting for it to go. But that's so much better because it allows them to recycle the count and try other things, try to fix it on the pad. But delays happen. So that's number 2. So 1 is great success that we're all here to celebrate. 2 is, all right, come back, recycle. But again, we have a good time to recycle within this. Let me draw that distinction for you. A lot of the launches that we are on have what are called instantaneous launch windows, which means it's trying to catch up with the space station, or it's trying to get to a very precise orbit on a very precise time. And they have literally a launch window of 1 second. So if they even miss it by 1 second, start over, do it again. We're not in that boat tonight. We have plenty of time for recycle and relaunch if that happens. So that brings us to number 3. Number 3 is there's a possibility that we won't get there, that we'll light the rocket, that everything will look great, and then for one reason or another, we don't achieve orbit. Our commitment to you, our contract with you, we aren't successful until we achieve orbit. So what I always tell people, there's this natural sense of cheering and high-fiving and such an emotional release at launch, which is cool. I get it, I understand it. But I'm the one that's always sitting there going, wait for the second stage. Because First stage has got to work. Second stage has got to work. And I will say, again, being old these days, I don't think of myself as old, but I've been involved in a lot of launches. They used to fail a lot more frequently than they do now. The whole notion of the design advances and the computers and automatic counts and all that kind of stuff really minimize, particularly with a proven bird like the Falcon 9. I mean, that thing is a warhorse at this point. But you have to get ready in advance. Oh, this one might not get there. Now, a couple of things about that. The first thing is, if you've read our contract, and I suspect most of you have, you know that if we don't make it, we'll fly you again. We are committed to get you to orbit, and we will do that. And we have always done that. Even back in our early days when we lost a couple of them, we came back, we flew, and there was a great day. So that's the first thing to understand, is that we'll do it again. And the second thing is I like to think of, I try to put myself in your place, and in particular your loved one's place, because hopefully not real soon, but when my time comes, I'm going to be on one of these rockets flying along. And if we didn't make it, my first reaction is strap me on this thing again and try again, and we'll get there. And not only is that comforting to me, it also says a lot about, we're all space geeks at Celestis, and we believe and we know that what we're doing is helping to create markets and commercial space activity. So there's no such thing as failure for us. It's just how many times, if more than one, do we have to try. But I want you all to think about that. And you can't get comfortable, but you can not be shocked if you see a delay, or if the last time we flew out of Vandenberg, it's been a long time since we've been here, was in 2001, September 21, 10 days after 9/11. There were tanks at the main gate of Vandenberg when we flew. That rocket, a Taurus, which was a very well proven rocket, got off the pad, second stage lit, second stage underperformed. We went into the ocean just past Antarctica. Not a great day, but nobody dies, right? And we came back, and that ended up being our first mission on Falcon, was our repeat launch for that. So I'm dwelling on this the only time you'll hear me talking about this, but I think we all understand that it is rocket science, that we are pushing the boundaries of performance in all of the machines, and we just have to, what I like is we have such collective karma and good vibes here. We're going to be pushing that thing along with it as it takes off. Okay, so that's the official pre-launch briefing that I have to give. And I've always done it for 19 years, or 19 missions, almost 30 years. And we've now accomplished that. We have some extra stuff at this pre-launch briefing. We're very fortunate and privileged to have a gentleman who's going to be on the console tonight. What does that mean? He's launching the damn thing. So Andy Wolfsig, who is the local American Legion Lompoc commander, but he flies Falcon 9s. And we thought it would be great to have Andy come in today and tell us a little bit like what it's like, what to expect, what do the missions say. And so without really anything other than thank you again, please meet Andy.
Well, good afternoon. Again, my name is Andy Wolfstig, and it's a pleasure for me to be with you here today. Just some quick background on me. I've been fascinated with space and spaceflight since I was a young child. And I joined the Air Force in hopes of becoming an astronaut. But unfortunately, like the military usually does, they had different plans for me, and it wasn't my life goal, but that's okay. I got to spend about 27 years working in and around space operations, flying GPS satellites, doing launch, all kinds of different things like that. So I still got to be around space, and in fact, over those 27 years, I had a chance to meet over 40 different astronauts, have dinner with them, work for them. So the first and the last man to walk on the moon, the person that has the longest spacewalk in history, some of the people that have been on the ISS, the lady who did the Boston Marathon, Sunny Williams, who did that in the ISS, the first commander of U.S. Space Force, General J. Raymond. So I've had a chance to meet a lot of those people, and it's a phenomenal community and a lot of fun. And even one time, in passing, I got a chance to meet Elon Musk out here. But it was much more fun to meet Neil deGrasse Tyson. He was much more fun to talk with. So after I retired from the Air Force, I went back as a contractor supporting launch operations here at Vandenberg. And in addition to the other things that I mentioned in my bio, working with Scouts and Scuba Club out here and some different things, as Charlie mentioned, I get a chance to sit on console for a lot of the launches here at Vandenberg. And so I'm going to spend just a couple minutes talking about that and what it's like to be on console for all these different missions. And in that time, I'd say I've probably been involved in about 70 launch countdowns, and to date, all successful. So when it comes to launching a rocket, as was already mentioned, a lot of things have to go right. They say that it takes 1 million things to go right and only one thing to go wrong to prevent you from getting to space. So a lot of what we do is double and triple checking what's going on with the rocket, with the launch pad, with everything going around in the area to make sure that it's safe and ready to launch. For this launch, SpaceX has been working on this booster and this rocket for several weeks. They've been refurbishing it. It's on its 10th mission. It's already been to space 9 times. And just over this weekend, they've put it all together, assembled the first stage, the second stage, and put all the satellites on top. And then early this morning, very early this morning, they rolled that vehicle out to the launch pad. 230-foot tall rocket, moved it a couple hundred yards from the hangar out to the pad. And once it was there and everything was connected, the electrical lines and the fuel lines and everything else, they started to raise it up to vertical. So once it gets vertical, that's when the real work starts and everybody starts double and triple checking to make sure everything's ready to go. At the same time, the base here at Vandenberg, there were people out there starting to make sure that the areas that are going to be closed for the launch don't have any people or vehicles out there. We don't want people in the wrong places where it's not going to be safe during the launch operations. So they started, security forces was out there clearing the beaches and some of the areas to make sure that nobody was out there where they shouldn't be. And we also have to coordinate out in the ocean, the sea space, as well as the airspace that surrounds the base to make sure that the entire flight corridor is going to be safe. And interestingly, here at Vandenberg, we also have to coordinate with Union Pacific Railroad because, as would be expected, the railroad was here first before our space was. So they actually have the right-of-way, and their railroad line goes right past the launch site. Fortunately, we've got a very good working relationship with us. They understand how time constrained we are on our launches and that sometimes we only have a couple of seconds. So we don't expect the train is going to be preventing us from launching. But again, we have to coordinate with them just to make sure that they know when we're going to be going. Another interesting tidbit about that railroad line, back in September of 1959, that is the railroad line that Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev rode from Los Angeles up to San Francisco on. And as he came past the base, we made sure we had all our rockets and missiles up there so he could see them. So about 6 hours before the launch, some of the systems on the rocket start to be pressurized. And industrial safety dictates that we don't have people standing around the rocket at that point because it's just not safe to be there at the high pressures and as we start getting into some of the cold temperatures. So just a few people are left on the pad at about 6 hours. Everybody else starts moving away and into their launch positions. And then as we transition to those launch positions, for these rockets, especially these days, that team is not just here at Vandenberg. That team is also in Los Angeles. Some of the people on the team that are launching the rocket tonight are out at Cape Canaveral in Florida. Not because that's where the rocket was supposed to launch from, but just that's the consolidated team that comes together on day of launch to make it all happen. So most of those engineers come on console about 3 to 4 hours before launch. And again, they're going to be double and triple checking that everything is working right, that all the systems are working, that the tests are all complete and satisfactory, and making sure that it's on target, it's on track to reach that T0. One of the final updates they have to do is make sure that the weather is what they predicted, and if it's not what they predicted, that they can update the flight computer on the rocket so that it flies in the correct trajectory on its way up to orbit. So at a couple points there in the last few hours, they'll gather the team. The launch director will make sure that everybody's not tracking any issues, or if they are tracking issues, they're going to close them out before we get down to the final few minutes. And we make sure that, again, all of the areas that have to be cleared, there aren't any ships out there. We don't have any fishermen or cruise ships or tankers going through the channel, or we don't have any aircraft that are flying around in the area. And even the oil platforms off the coast, especially for a launch like this when the first stage is coming back, they have to shelter in place. They can't be outside. They've got to be in the protected areas of their platform just because of the risks associated with spaceflight. So again, I've talked a little bit about the safety. That is our number one reason for being here at the launch base, is to make sure that this is done safely. And getting to orbit is good, but we need to make sure that it's done safely, and that nobody that's in the general public or not involved with the launch is put at any additional risk. During a regular launch, there's going to be some pieces of debris that come off. As the stages come apart, pieces come off the rocket and they fall down. So we have to plan for that. We also have to plan for if more than just a couple pieces come raining down, and make sure that those areas are clear. So there's a team of people on console that are going to be doing calculations to make sure, depending on the real-time winds and the real-time weather, where that debris would go, and that there's nobody in those areas. With the safety systems, we fly 2 different types of safety systems on our rockets and missiles out here. One of them, the more traditional one, involves systems on the ground where there's actually somebody with a finger near the button ready to blow it up if it starts deviating from its course. And they've got all their systems. They're watching where it goes. It can go plus or minus a little bit, but if it goes outside those lanes, to keep the public safe, we have to blow it up. The Falcon 9 does that by itself. It has what's called an autonomous flight safety system on it, and that computer, standalone computer on the rocket, tracks where it's going using GPS and the systems on the rocket, and if it detects that it's going out of bounds, it will blow itself up. They have never had that happen, but we have tested to make sure that those systems work. And before the launch happens, a lot of people are involved in double checking that software and that programming. So in the final few hours of the count, the remaining preparations happen, and they start getting the rocket ready to accept the fuel that they're going to be putting on. So for the Falcon 9, that happens, the loading of the fuel happens in the last 35 minutes of the launch. And a minor correction there, unfortunately Falcon 9, as soon as you start loading the fuel, that's the only launch attempt you get for the day. Because they load that fuel at super cold temperatures. The liquid oxygen is at minus 340 degrees. And it doesn't sit on the rocket very long. It starts to heat up. And so as soon as it's on, they need to launch. So hopefully we get to that. Everybody's go at 35 minutes, and they start loading it up. They put the liquid oxygen on and the kerosene. over 1 million pounds of fuel onto the rocket in 35 minutes. And it finishes within about 120 seconds of launch. They top it off and it's ready to go. The final go call happens in the final couple go calls will happen in the last 10 minutes of the countdown. And then about 90 seconds before the launch, that's when the computers fully take over and they monitor everything because there's just too much for people to do. The computers are much better at tracking all those sensors and systems. And as mentioned, last week, about 8 days ago, we got to T-minus 3 seconds, and the computers found a valve in the wrong position, and they stopped the count. There was actually already flame on the pad. They hadn't ignited the engines, but they had pre-lit the pad to ignite those engines, and they had to shut it all back down and then immediately start taking fuel off the rocket before it got too warm. So fortunately, and that did take a couple days to get it fixed. They got it fixed, and then we turned around and launched it a couple days later. So at liftoff, again, as already mentioned, a lot of people start cheering, a lot of people get very excited, but with that rocket is not on orbit for about 8 minutes. It takes that long to get up there. And so by the end of the first burn on the second stage, the payload is safely in orbit. And about 7.5 to 8 minutes after the launch, that's when the first stage comes back to land, again, for a Falcon 9. This one, again, stage 1, it's about 130 feet tall. As it comes back to land, let's see, timing-wise, it's about 6 minutes after launch. You should, if it's clear enough, you will see it ignite as it comes through the upper atmosphere. It'll burn for 7 to 10 seconds to slow down. It's going about 7,000 miles an hour at that point in time. And then it starts coming through the thicker part of the atmosphere. And about 20 seconds later, about a minute later, it'll be going about 700 miles an hour. And about 20 seconds later, it'll relight to land on the pad. So as it comes through the sound barrier on the way back down, that's what generates the sonic boom. And an interesting phenomenon out here is the timing of where most people are watching the launch. The sonic boom hits you at almost exactly the same time as it lands on the pad. So don't be surprised when it goes boom when it lands on the pad. That's normal. That's just, it takes that long for the sound to get to you. But again, that is an amazing part of these launches, watching the rocket actually come back, and it just seems to kind of hover over the base for several minutes before it finally comes back down and lands. So again, as I mentioned, this will be the 10th launch for this booster, this stage 1. And if we successfully go tonight, this will be the fastest turnaround between 2 launches that SpaceX has ever done here at Launch Pad 4. It'll be just over 8 days. Their previous record was 11 days. So with that, that's just a really quick snapshot of kind of what's going to be happening on Countdown, what we're going to be doing and watching for, the things that the base is responsible for, and the things that SpaceX is going to be doing. As a military and a launch operations veteran, I get excited about it every single time it happens. Even if I'm not on console, I will get up. Doesn't matter what time, day or night, I'll go out and watch the launches because it's so amazing. I get goosebumps. They're beautiful, they're awe-inspiring, and it's an incredible experience to be a part of. So I can't begin to express the words that you're going to be feeling as this goes on today, but know that it is all of us involved in the business. It's an amazing thing, and we're glad that we get to share it. So with that, I don't know where we are on time. I don't know if I have time for a couple questions.
We do,
Okay.
and I get the first one.
Okay.
So a 4-hour window, but 1 shot.
So up until we fuel the rocket,
Gotcha.
we can adjust when it's going to go. As soon as they start putting fuel on, then we're going today. So that's about 35 minutes before the launch.
Anybody else? There's one back
Yes.
there.
How far will you be from the pad? So I'm not sure which. You're at the airport? So you're roughly 7 to 10 miles from the pad. So unfortunately, there isn't anywhere on the base where you can actually see all the way to the ground at the launch pad because it's just over the hills. You will be able to see the engine relight before it lands on the pad though, and you'll see it as soon as it ignites, the whole sky will light up and you'll be able to see it within seconds of it coming off the pad. Sir? The payloads? So this mission, available in the open press, this mission is, SpaceX calls it Transporter 7. And as previously mentioned, it's a ride-share program. So there are 50 satellites on this mission from 19 different countries. And they all went to SpaceX and said, hey, I want to ride to space. And SpaceX sold them a spot on the payload. And so there are 50 satellites stacked in the top of that rocket. And all different sizes. So, yes, sir. The size of the Celestis satellite?
Oh, the Celestis. It's not a satellite. I'm sorry. We're what's called an attached payload, so we don't ever get released. We stay on the Endor 2, great name, huh? Which is essentially the space tug that's operated by spaceflight, and Wally Lang will tell you more about that in just a minute, with photos of our machine. But we're never sometimes we're released, sometimes we're not. This time we're an attached payload, so we're going to orbit on the Endor. Yes, sir. Steve?
Any information about the new MVAC tonight?
All right. So I can give a little bit of information about it. So he asked about the new, he said the MVAC nozzle. That's the Merlin vacuum engine on stage 2. And so SpaceX is flying a new engine on stage 2, or a new nozzle on stage 2. This is the first mission they're flying that on. Normally, I want to say the nozzle, I've never actually been up next to the stage 2 nozzle because it's usually encapsulated. But it's about a third the size of previous nozzles. And it has to do with performance that they're trying to get out of the rocket. So they've made some adjustments, required a couple other adjustments on the rocket as well. But this is the first flight of that.
Hey, how about around this? I learned a lot, so I know you all. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Oh, I unplugged somebody. Good. All right. Yeah, we've got a certificate of, this can go on your wall. This is a highly desired Celestis certificate of appreciation, which is made out to Commander Andy. Thank you very much. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Great job. Okay, let me say a little bit quickly about how to watch this thing tonight. Do not try to take a picture. Do not watch it through binoculars or anything that will make, you're here to revel in the experience. We have 3 videographers that we hired for this mission. We will get you all the video. We'll find all the photos. Rely on us. You can have that. You just need to stand there because the whole world will light up. If we're clear, the whole world will light up. And you can't view that through a rangefinder or a telephone or a set of binoculars. Just enjoy the moment. It's a visceral. It's an amazing sense. So I always try to say that so that, and yet somebody still is going to have their, you were warned. All right, we're especially pleased to also have today our mission manager. the gentleman that managed the process of taking our precious flight capsules, which we hand deliver to Washington, and they, Spaceflight Industries, built the container that's attached to the space tug, to the Endor 2, and in general they're the people that we look to when you see all these various launch dates out in the press and other places. We only listen to one entity, and it's the person that we contracted with. What a surprise, about launch dates. So Wally's been great, patient, and very helpful to us. So please welcome Wally Lang from Spaceflight Industries. He's going to give you an overview of the mission. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. So, as Charlie mentioned, my name is Wally Lang, and I'm the mission manager for Celestis and the mission director for spaceflight, responsible for the manufacturing and the assembly of the heavenly casket, as we call the assembly that will be carrying the ashes up into space and getting that certified for flight and integrated onto the rocket. And so to provide a little bit of an overview, and I believe there are some images here, so I'll take a moment to, would you mind hitting the next slide, Keith? So here we have some images of the Endor 2 plate that Charlie was just referencing, and here is the Celestis heavenly casket. As you can see, it's affixed to the Endor plate, and on this side will be a couple spacecraft, some commercial, some government, one by NASA, the Serbia, Colorado Inner Radiation Belt Experiment spacecraft, which is just a 3U satellite that's going to perform some scientific research on NASA's behalf. To talk about the mission tonight, the rocket will take off at approximately 11:45, I think it's 11:48 p.m., and it will immediately go southwest, and it will cross the equator at roughly 22:30 local time. So it has to go west, both to go over the ocean, and then that's why it sort of goes backwards in time. It goes back a time zone. And for a couple sequences of events that are going to take place on the mission. Sorry, I'm trying my best with is this better with the microphone? Okay. After ignition, about 1 minute into the launch will be max Q, which is the maximum atmospheric pressure that the rocket will experience. Roughly 1 minute later, 2 minutes into launch, will be stage separation. So that's when the first stage, which carries about 9 Merlin engines, will have exhausted all of its fuel and separate. And that's when you'll start to see the MVAC engine that Andy was just referring to. Roughly 3.5 minutes into launch, the fairing will deploy. And actually, Keith, if you wouldn't mind just going ahead 2 slides, I can maybe point to a couple of the things that I'm discussing. So, yeah, the first stage here is what does a lot of the heavy lifting, literally and figuratively. And that will then return to Earth and be reused for future missions. And then the second stage is what eventually brings the spacecraft into orbit. Up top is the fairing, which will separate. It's the nose cone, if you will. And so if you could see inside, so you actually, look at that, you can. So here's the Merlin vacuum engine, and then sort of in here is where those 50 spacecraft would be located. And for this particular mission, about an hour into it, the second stage will circularize into orbit and start deploying spacecraft. There are 2 altitudes at which spacecraft will be deployed for this mission. The first is at 500 kilometers, and a little over an hour at 67 minutes in is when the first spacecraft off of the Endor 2 plate will be deployed, and that's that NASA payload that I was referring to earlier. And then for until about an hour and 20 minutes is when the last deployment at 500 kilometers will take place. Then the second stage will burn again and raise up to 680 kilometers to deploy one final spacecraft. And that will happen at about 2.5 hours into the mission. And then a half hour later, about 3 hours after liftoff, is when the second stage can be expected to perform a deorbit maneuver and start to make its way back down towards Earth, which when it will eventually then re-enter the atmosphere, and the mission will be completed after quite some time. And Keith, if you wouldn't mind just going back to one slide, and so that's a breakdown of the mission. As Charlie mentioned, I work for Spaceflight, and we're a ride-share and integration mission management service. So we specialize in getting hardware into space, and we've ran a few missions with Celestis so far, and always had a wonderful time working with these folks. And as you can see here, this is the assembly that we've designed and built, the Heavenly Casket. These are the capsules that your loved ones are contained in. And I'd just like to say that, when I was first assigned Celestis as a customer, this was an interesting and exciting opportunity, but it was really more abstract in a sense. I understood what was going on, but it didn't really resonate with me fully until Charlie and Colby hand delivered those capsules, and I got to hold them and look at them and compare the roster to make sure that everyone that was supposed to be present was, and no more, no less. And that was really it was an interesting, and it was a heavy moment for me, to be quite frank, to see it and then be faced with sort of the memories of all your loved ones, and to understand, just even for a moment, everything that they went through, aspired to be as people, as they got to live their lives. And I'd like to read some words from the engineer who actually assembled this casket as well, because he and I were talking about this the other day, and he felt similarly too when he was assembling the casket, and it's quite an experience. And so Stephen says, the Heavenly Casket was built to the highest standards of the aerospace industry. Each step of the process involves several inspections and verifications to ensure the highest level of quality. There was relentless attention to detail at every stage. Reverence was taken while torquing every fastener, inspecting every plate, and placing your loved ones within the Heavenly Casket with the highest level of care and respect. And I can say with absolute certainty that that's true, that we take this mission and the work that we do for Celestis and for your loved ones very seriously. And it is, it's something that we care about greatly, and we're honored that, we had the opportunity to do this, and that you folks trusted us with this work. That really represents everything that I had to say that describes the mission and the efforts that we took, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you folks might have. Awesome. Well,
You did a great job.
thank you, Charlie.
Thank you so much, Wally. Thank you, sir. And he busted his rear to get here he showed up at about 3:34, 3:35, but having flown in and lit the fire to get here. So thank you so much again, Wally, and you've taken great care of everyone here. So when we first started the Celestis Inc. back in the deep mists of time in 1994, we were all space geeks. We were all true believers, and one of the things that we've done on every mission that we've launched is we select one or two charities that catch our attention. So Celestis is committed not only to furthering the exploration and development of space, but also the preservation of the planet here on Earth. So over the years, our charities have ranged from the CARE Tsunami Relief to the Wildlife Waste Station in Los Angeles, where they take abused circus animals and others and put them in a wonderful place to exist. We've painted the Deke Slayton Museum in Sparta, Wisconsin. But some of the things that we really enjoyed doing were we sent a young Mexican-American boy to space camp early on. More recently, we've funded a group called Taking Up Space. Great name, huh? And what they do is they fund Native American women, 6th grade through 12th grade, and send them to space camp. So not a lot of them have opportunities that your kids have or others to go to space camp. So our funding, your funding, because where do we get the funds that we use? It comes from the proceeds of the mission. We focus on our charities, and you can see we have most of them listed on the website. We're getting to where we have so many that we have to do some rotation because they take up a lot of space. But today, and one of the other things we like to do is help out in the local communities where we fly from. So we've done some stuff in New Mexico, obviously some stuff in Florida. And for today's charity, we found, or they found us, a really interesting program here in Lompoc that helps students learn about and participate in space-related activities. And so Ava, yeah, there you are. So amazing lady. I know her as Ava. You may know her as Lady Rocket. And we've brought in her. And did you bring one of her students? Carlos?
Because my foundation, thank you so much. Okay, first of all, Susan Copeland, co-founder of Lady Rocket Foundation, local teacher. She loves every and all students with all her heart, and without her, Lady Rocket Foundation couldn't function. And here is a beautiful proof of our 6-year-old commitment. It's Carlos Lopez. Do you want to say him? Not yet. I promise him I am not going to put him on the spot. But Susan, this is my public opportunity to acknowledge you for everything that you've done. And I will tell you a little bit more about it. But you can leave if you are not comfortable. If you are comfortable, hang around.
Let's make him feel welcome.
Okay. Thank you. But first of all, I want to thank Charles, Celeste's team, and opportunity to meet all of you. I did not know what to expect, and it exceeded my expectations. The love, the compassion, the beautiful contribution that all of you made into the memories of your beloved ones. So thank you again. I am a 3rd-generation space entrepreneur and maverick. It started with my grandfather, who helped to build one of the first European airlines. Yes, I have some accent, I'm from Europe. And then my father was one of the co-founders of the Polish space program during the time when Yuri Gagarin was getting ready to fly in cosmos. And I am bringing to you, through Charles and his team, greetings from Yuri Gagarin's night, which took place on Saturday. We have it in Los Angeles every year, not only to celebrate Yuri as the first man in space, but to do something that Lady Rocket Foundation stands for. Commitment to betterment of life on Earth, peace in space, and engaging all of you in a beautiful journey of space. I am. Hold on, can you? Always someone calls me. But anyway, going back to this beautiful event, I am also a co-founder of Copernic Space, which is a space, and there are a lot of young people like me, and even younger, is the largest space Web3 based platform dedicated to democratization of access to space, but also loving what a lot of you were talking about, loving the presence and future of space through art, music, entertainment, and fashion, just in case you didn't notice it. And we do it using, and we hope to work with Celestis on some of those initiatives because they are the best, but you already know it. One of the very unique things that we do is we sponsor artists all over the world, including Ukraine. And by the way, I traveled to Ukraine recently because I tend to do things that seems to be unpopular but needed, including doing California Space Center in Lompoc, not popular but needed. And we use NFT technology, non-fungible tokens, but space art, and allow me to make a kind of a gesture like this, show you my T-shirt, and you can read here something that I am sure a lot of you remember. Do you remember The Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd? Okay, so do I. But I was behind the Iron Curtain when this song was carrying a hope while identifying the challenge of being human. So I sponsored incredible, together with Pink Floyd, a competition for artists, The Dark Side of the Moon. We completed it. Some of the winners are available on Spaceables, which is our space art platform. Look it up because it has beautiful collection of artists. And one of the artists who won is actually from Kharkiv, Ukraine. And it was Scott Page of Pink Floyd who selected him. So space is full of incredible gestures of endurance, love, togetherness, passion. And I know that you already met a lot of friends here. And I just want to thank for giving me an opportunity and acknowledge Sue and acknowledge Carlos and Charles.
Thank you. I think I unplugged it. There we go. Thank you so much. Susan, Carlos, Ava, this is a small token of our appreciation for the work that you do. We really are supportive. Thank you so much, Carlos, for coming today.
May I just 60 seconds? We are supposed to have teachers here and more students to recognize all of them, but it's a spring break. Quickly, what we do is space inspiration education together with NASA JPL. We take it also to Ukraine, Poland, Croatia. So we are here for space together with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. Okay, we're getting close. I want to say again, welcome. I want to say you ain't seen nothing yet. I want to say we appreciate each and every one of you. This is for you. This is your service. This is your day. And before we close, I think Mr. Colby has a couple of notes to share with you, and then we'll go out and have some great Babcock wine. Yes, ma'am. Question. Yes, we plan to, I'm looking at our videographer, he's under the gun, to post it about 2 hours after it ends. So it will be up and you can watch it before, your friends can watch it before the launch tonight on YouTube. And if you go to events, pardon? Oh, the launch will be SpaceX webcasts all their launches. So that webcast, which we'll pick up in the tent tonight, so you can be there for the 15 minutes before the countdown occurs. And you can, anybody that you're telling, have them go to events.celestis.com, click on Excelsior flight, that's us, and you'll see two icons. Icon 1 is watch the memorial service. Icon 2 is watch the launch. And we'll be porting the SpaceX webcast into that area. So it's a kind of a one-stop shop. And as I said, I think everyone's aware that we professionally produce a video for download. It'll give us a couple months because it's a lot of work, but we have 3 videographers who are getting all kinds of great images for tonight, and that will be available to you online, and we'll post and publish when it's available. Other questions? All right, thank you very much. Again, I'll be mingling with you out at the launch viewing site. Sir? Yes. Uh-huh. Yeah. I don't know. It's a good question. It may resonate off the atmosphere. I don't. Good question. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But you'll know it when you hear it. All right. Let me turn it over to Kobe. I'm around. Come up and say hi. And again, this is all about you guys today.
Thank you, Charlie. So some of you I spoke to yesterday about conducting interviews with our videographer. If you're interested in those the interviews, right off here to the right, our videographer is going to set up. It is a beautiful spot at the Babcock side yard. So if you're interested in the reception interview, please make your way over there, at least at some point in the next 30 minutes or so, and we'll get those interviews done. One last thing for the launch tonight, I've heard some people may want to drive their own vehicle to the launch site. We can't do that. No privately owned vehicles are allowed inside the airport. There have been a couple of exceptions that based on medical conditions. If you have a medical condition that you need to talk to me about, please come talk to me during the reception and we'll work it out. But that's the exception. So now we'll go ahead, we'll end the memorial service. Please make your way over to, you're going to leave the tent. The reception area is just out to the left. We have wine and a lot of like a charcuterie and cheese. And please go enjoy, and we'll be mingling amongst you shortly.
I thought aircraft tried to have a constantly increasing or it's a never decreasing process.